Welcome to This Podcast is Making Me Thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This is Two Up and Two Down. Here's our producer, Chris, to start us off.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Two Up and Two Down. And today we've got a season 4 episode, and it's the handicap spot. That's a good one to start this day off with. Tony, over to you. What's your first up?
Handicap spot season 4, Larry David. Got to find 2 positives and got to find 2 negatives for this episode. I'm going to start this. I got a lot of I'm looking over my notes here. I got a lot of lines, which a Larry David episode will usually give you, especially early on season 4. My first up, though, I even on the rewatch, I just something about this scene makes me laugh. And it's probably not on anyone else's radar. I don't know if I would even wrote it down, but I laugh every time when Jerry and Elaine get to the Drake's house and they're so excited. They sit down every Super Bowl, every fight. They're all ready to go. They're just so excited to see that big screen TV. Everyone remembers that humongous screen TV with that same look there. Colangelo had at his house. We used to go over there, watch the Super Bowl, watch the fights. That was like the big screen TV back then. And they were so excited. And then it was just shot down with we broke up and the Drake's crying. We talked to the Drake and the Drake about it. But yeah, I just love how they went from up to down, and then Elaine just any good restaurants around here. They just quickly switched to that. But there was just so much packed into that little scene that I just love every time I watch it. Just Jerry was so excited just watching that TV, he can't wait, and then he just gets crushed by the Drake and the Drakette breaking up. So maybe not the first pick of the draft here, but that's my first up.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. That's quite a unique pick there. A scene to choose. All right, Chris, over to you. What's your first up?
Not too unique, my friend. I had it as well. I had Lane and Jerry visiting the Drake and Drakette. We broke up. That's what I had. And obviously, friends of the show, Drake and Drakette. Yeah, the enthusiasm, right? His enthusiasm. So proud of his gift. The highs and lows. So yeah. So second to last episode of season 4. This was the arc season, so it was one of those kind of just slide it in there, and 27.5 million people watched this Larry David written episode. So here we go. For me, and this was an interesting one, I'm going to go with Frank Costanza. It's his premiere episode. Now, for those watching live, we know it wasn't Jerry Stiller, but he still gave you a really good performance in this, Frank. And then obviously the Frank we know, Jerry Stiller, took it to another level. Just the whole thing, him getting arrested at the end, and why don't you have George become your butler? And that whole stuff was incredible. Frank brought it in this episode for a premiere episode. And we'll stick with Jerry Stiller here, but for a premiere episode of Jerry Stiller, he did not disappoint. And then obviously, if you guys watched our best characters bracket, Frank Costanza won it. So he really kicked it off in style here. So I know it's a lot, and there's a lot of Frank here, but I think that there's plenty in this episode to touch on. But I'm going to go with Frank as my first up.
Yeah, great pick. And of course, this being season 4, episode 22. That's how late of appearance he makes in Seinfeld. So, yeah, what an impact he made, Jerry Stiller. So, Tony, back to you. What's your second up?
So we're giving it to Stiller in the syndication. It sounds like not the original. I understand. For those keeping score, and yeah.
I mean, listen, like I said, I think the impact of the original father was very solid when watching live, but he wasn't delivering lines like, "Can you see your face in there?" or "and deliver it." You know what I mean? That's Stiller, and I think he is Frank Costanza. So yes, we're going syndication Stiller for this one.
I got you, and I'm on board. I wrote it down. I have a few other things there. We'll get to it. I think we'll get to it. My second up again. It's hard. I wrote down, and we'll get there as we get to the deeper analyzing here. But this episode flows really well, and there's so many great lines. It's very quick. It's very LD was just wrote this episode like perfect as far as that goes. Dialogue, just things popping off. But to find like a big up, I'm having a little trouble, so I'm going to go with another thing that always gets me. I think this guy is underrated. As I'm thinking about it, we left him off of our bracket that O'Hara mentioned. I don't know how I overlooked this one, and no one even called us out on it. In all the tweets and everything else we got, YouTube, everyone's saying we missed a bunch of people. The wheelchair salesman with the Cougar 9000 is the Rolls Royce of wheelchairs. This is like you're almost glad to be handicapped. I mean, number one by Hospital Supplies, but this guy is selling this wheelchair all over the place. $2,000, the whole thing. George, anything a little less? What does he say? Anything a little more or less? I messed up his whole line, but you know what I'm saying here. Yeah, anything a little more less expensive? But yeah, the hospital salesman's guy's great, doing his thing there. Of all the used car salesman type guys you can have, this guy's out there selling hospital goods and supplies and things like that. That's a rough racket. I knew a guy who did that, and you're all over the place with that stuff. So, and I think that guy delivers. He reminds me of the guy, and his actor's name's tip of my tongue. He was in Little Miss Sunshine, that old time guy. This salesman guy reminds me of that guy. We'll get his name. Producer Chris will get his name and throw it up there. But it reminds me of that guy a lot. I just love this guy. He's very old school, and he's out there making the sale. So that's my second up.
Well, yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, the guy that you were mentioning, Richard Portnoy, he plays the.
Yeah, but who's the guy? I think that he's like the guy from Little Miss Sunshine. The old
Alan Arkin.
Alan Arkin. Yes, he reminds me of Alan Arkin. This guy a lot. I love him. That's my second up.
All right, very good. Yeah, I love that scene. That whole scene with Kramer, George, and the salesman. So yeah, great up there. Chris, what's your second up?
Incredible up. Probably the up of the episode. Clearly, that guy was incredible. He's talking about The Sopranos and everything else. He's a familiar face for sure. I got a lot of. You know what? Since your ups are done, I'm gonna go. To piggyback off that, I'm just going to go Kramer in general. I think, and it kicks off because you just mentioned it. Him riding around in that little wheelchair. As good a physical comedy as you'll get. Usually we see Kramer flopping and doing this, but for him to ride in that wheelchair was amazing. Him convincing George in the beginning to just park in the handicap spot, I thought was just classic Kramer and George. We've had that theme throughout the series where whether it's, the airport, getting him a ticket, I'll get the double miles, this, that, the other thing, the bereavement fare. Kramer always has a way with George. The guy can convince him to do anything. It's incredible. And the trust they have is unbelievable there. So Kramer's great. And then even at the end, I love Kramer. The girl broke up with him. She called me a hipster doofus. That takes us back to one of our earlier interviews with Jay McInerney over here, who wrote the TV Guide article. Jay claims he brought up the hipster doofus line to Larry David, which was then used in this episode.
I know that the cast and the writers read the piece because years later I met Larry David, who said that they had borrowed the phrase hipster doofus from my piece in describing Kramer.
Yeah. Nice David.
So I'm quite proud of that one.
So Kramer brought it. This is vintage Kramer at this point. The ups and downs, handicap shot. Obviously they're riding around in the wheelchair to fall in love with a girl and convincing George to come with them to buy it. Just great Kramer all the way. So that's my second thumbs up.
All right, yeah, thank you, Chris. Tony, back to you. This time we're going to discuss the downs. What's your first one?
Yeah, definitely a great Kramer, and I was going to mention the McInerney too. So good call out. Yeah, listen, I only wrote down 3 downs, and typically, I'm not calling this an A+ episode. We'll get to grades in a minute. So obviously, it's not what I'm alluding to. I'm just saying I think when we did our original rankings in this episode, I might have went a little low on this one. I don't think I put it that high. It's not one of my favorites from season 4. Season 4 is so packed. But on this rewatch, I enjoyed it a lot more than I remember enjoying it, and so it just floats so well. And there's a lot of great lines. So downs are hard to come by. Um, I'm going to piggyback off O'Hara's up and actually give a down on some of the Kramer stuff. I thought the Kramer went a little bit. I mean, I know what they were trying to do, but I'm going to ask her to marry me. I love her, Jerry. I mean, he goes all in on this chick. Like, that's not Kramer. Kramer, man-made prisons. He's a swinging kind of guy. He's not. I mean, he went gaga for Pam. Yes, maybe, but this is a little too much. I thought a little overboard. I know they had to sell that he wanted to get the wheelchair to, because he fell in love with her, but I just think it's a little out of character for the K-Man. I don't think he would fall that head over heels for this chick and just all of a sudden, she's beautiful and all that stuff, and I'm gonna marry her. She's the one. He said a bunch of lines there. I was just like, whoa, pump the brakes there, K-Man. So that's my first down. Is Kramer a bit out of character there with the handicap girl.
Thank you, Tony. So Chris, over to you. What's your first down?
Yeah, it's interesting, and thinking about this 30 years later, again, it sounded like more like Larry David there, right? Like, I know he did the wheelchair thing in Curb, so, but again, we're reacting to as analysts when we see it for the first time, so I hear you. Yeah, not a lot of downs, a lot of nitpicky. Do I give nitpicky downs? Potentially. You know what? You're not going to like this, but, hate the Drake, love the Drake. Enough already. Enough. I think it was just a little too much. And I know America loves it. I hate the Drake, love it. And this was kind of the beginning of it. I enjoyed the scene, Long Island, of course, but I think they got a little too catchphrasy here. Just a little too much. And for my taste, didn't love it. Okay, so a little too much on the Drake, hating the Drake, love the Drake, and then when they're back in the apartment talking about it even more, it was a little too much for my taste in season 4 here. So that's my first down. Enough with the Drake stuff.
No, yeah, I agree. That could get a little played. So I see that as a valid point. Tony, back to you. What's your second up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point, and I kind of it stays true to what O'Hara. He does not like catchphrases. We know that about my partner over there, and the Drake does get played. Listen, my second down is kind of the reason why this whole episode kind of falls, isn't that kind of higher range when I talked about earlier. It's because the ending, I don't, and O'Hara mentioned, Frank earlier, but I'm going to tie into that. I don't like the tie into the Butler stuff. I thought it was a little sitcom-y. I mean, I know what they're doing, obviously, and it's not that it's not funny. It's just I don't know. It's a little too much tie in there, and then the ending, the final ending with the woman on the wheelchair, I never really cared for, to be honest with you. I just don't. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it just looks. Maybe just because it looks so bad. It's just such a set up. It was like, okay, action, and you just see this woman, stunt woman, just flying down on the wheelchair. I don't know, something about that scene never sat right with me. It just looks so. Maybe that's the point. It just looks so silly and so ridiculous that she's just in the middle of the street down this hill, just flying down a hill on a wheelchair. And then George with the Butler stuff kind of tied in at the end. I didn't really like that, and I didn't like that as the theme, the old lady. That's exactly what happened to you, Frank. And then, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden, I do like the old ladies playing cards. I mean, I like that they reshot the episode. Obviously, we talked about it earlier with Frank and everything else, Stiller. But listen, like I said, downs are hard to come by, but that's a big one with me. The ending just so silly. It just doesn't. It never played right with the rest of the episode. So that's my second down.
Thanks, Tony. And by the way, those ladies were playing mahjong, not cards. So, Chris, over to you. What's your second down?
That's right. It's funny. Campy just told me his mother plays that now. So shout out to Mrs. Campanella. And it's funny. You said I
thought mahjong was a card game. I have no idea. When Campy's playing it, forget it.
That was his mother. But anyway,
that makes sense. Okay.
You said it was funny. The girl in the wheelchair for years. I told people I thought it was Heather Locklear. It just happened so fast. Yeah, boom.
There's no Heather Locklear from what I recall in the replay.
Yeah, so there you go. But in the ending, it's funny. You mentioned the ending, but you didn't mention the ending, which I didn't like, which was, and I wrote, felt sitcom-y, like when they're parking in front of the fire hydrant and cram.
Yes, I didn't mention it,
just,
but that was what I meant in my ending part. Yes, exactly.
yeah,
Oh, walk in front of the fire hydrant. Yes, I forgot to mention
right.
it. But
What if there's a fire?
I
What are
don't-
the chances? Like
Yes.
that's just a perfect like sitcom, like bump. So I won't use that one. But yeah, that was another one. Just a couple of throwaway things here. You gave you two. I mean, George getting a veggie burger at the mall. Aren't they going to a party? What the hell's he doing getting a veggie burger? Right? Didn't make sense. Well, first off, why even get him? They're going to a party. What's he eating before? He's not that type of guy. He's a free food guy. You know what I mean? And then secondly, like, why didn't they take George's car? I forgot. Why did they even take the dad's car? Like, the TV was getting delivered. They didn't have to put it in the trunk or anything. So a couple downs, and I'll give you one more down. Just a throwaway line. Never liked it. Jerry saying, I'm thinking about getting a yo-yo. Like, I don't know. Sometimes they just throw these lines in. Jerry might be a yo-yo guy. I don't know. So I threw in a couple downs there. They're kind of just small, nitpicky things. But, the veggie burger, why didn't they take George's car in the first place? And then obviously Jerry's line about the yo-yo. I just thought, I don't know. On such a tight written show, it wasn't needed. So.
Thanks, Chris. That's a good down there. So, Tony, we're going to go back to you. Give us your final thoughts and a grade for the handicap spot.
Yeah, I think it's because Jerry has a yo-yo. I believe it's after this episode. Everybody's in the hospital when they go to slice that fat bastard up. Jerry does a yo-yo trick for the doctor. And I don't know if it's before or after this episode. I think it's after, but I'm not 100% positive. Maybe it's before. If it's before, then the getting the yo-yo part doesn't make any sense, which I agree with, which is why I wrote it down as well. And now I'm thinking about it. I wrote down yo-yo as well. Okay, we're getting to grades now. I say this a lot. That's why if you guys are playing this podcast, making me thirsty bingo cards here. I have 3 grades written down. One of those things I always say, and it's true. I'm looking at my card. I mean, just to reiterate, LD wrote this episode. Flows very nice. I wrote this down. I don't know how I mentioned it earlier. Very Curb-esque. I think it's very Curb Enthusiasm-esque. You can see it all over this episode. I'm surprised Howard didn't bring this up. This is his thing. Parking spot, alternate side, handicap spot, all the parking stuff. Yeah, I mean, I love when it's all 4 of them going somewhere. I mean, that has a lot to do with this episode, which is very much like the parking spot. The hipster doofus line, isosceles, we didn't bring that up. Great stuff there. Jerry's so proud of his triangle. The chip in. Maybe we should all get a house and live here. Like, what is great we're talking about? The sons of bitches. I love Jerry when they're all outside the car. You think be able to wheel it, the batteries go dead. A lot of good lines. It's not hers, it's theirs. Once it's no theirs, it should be ours. I know I'm going off here a little bit. Calling people I hardly know and demanding they return expensive gifts. That's my thing. Elaine's all upset. All that's to say, like I said, I have 3 episodes written down. I'm gonna go with the one I think is the safest. Howard has me going first on this one. So handicap spot, Larry David season 4, that pulls a lot of weight. I'm going to give it a solid clean B. I wrote every B grade down. So I think it's fair to just kind of give the middle one there, just a solid clean B. I don't think this dips into C range, and I don't think this makes the A range. So really any of the B's work for me. So I'll just go solid straight up B for the handicap spot.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, and just to go back to the yo-yo thing that you guys both mentioned, that Jerry did have a yo-yo in the implant episode, when they visited Roy in the hospital. So, so thanks again, Tony. And Chris, over to you. What's your grade and final thoughts here?
And not thinking nitpicky, but I think that was the Junior Mint, wasn't it? Up from above?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Junior Mint.
Either way, whatever episode it was before this episode. So be that as it may. So here we go. Handicap spot. Great analysis right there. Not really much more to add. I thought Kramer was great. George. Elaine not too much going on. Jerry kind of quarterbacking. I guess what I'm trying to say is no one really stole the show, if you will. When you think about the handicap, that was George double dipped, real smash. There's nothing really like that. I mentioned Jerry Stiller. That's a tricky one. I'm grading on Jerry Stiller here, but obviously John Randolph was the original. But I think it is important to acknowledge this was the birth of Frank Costanza. That deserves some value and credit here. But this is a tough one. This is season 4. So again, we grade for the whole 9 years, but then you kind of grade within each season. You know what I mean? So that's what makes this one a little tricky. So again, I had 2 grades, very similar, but I'm just going to take a little dip below. And Tony made these points. Like something just wasn't, we had obviously the Cougar 9000 guy, a lot of good stuff, but some of it was just a little off, like the Butler stuff potentially, a little too much of the Drake stuff, and that sitcom-y feel, which wasn't what they were really doing in season 4. So B- for the handicap spot.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks, a B and B- respectively. And we thank you all for joining us again, and we'll see everybody on the next episode.